code for the different types of forensic evidence. We'll code for whether there was forensic fraud. We'll code for whether there was misconduct by police or prosecutors or forensic examiners. We try to code conservatively so that we don't say something is present if it's not backed up with court papers or somewhere else. So in other words, we may, sometimes it seems obvious that a prosecutor must have known about some exculpatory evidence. But if it's not clearly written out in a court ruling that says they knew, then we don't code for that. We'll code for mistaken witness identification. We'll code for how a person was, whether there was a confession, what their interrogation looked like. We'll code for recantations, which are often pretty important. We code for cross-racial misidentification. So all this information is fed into our database and maintained, and it's available for people to use as needed. So the folks who might use it would include academic researchers, attorneys, both practicing and at law schools, journalists, and just people who are curious about criminal justice issues. So, for example, there's been a lot recently about false confessions. So if you wanted to know how many of our cases in the registry involve false confession, you can go to our website and search and do weed out all those cases that just involve false confessions. You find out that there's 333 cases that involve false confessions. And then you can also sort that by age, and you can see sort of, how prevalent this is among young defendants. If you want to know how many wrongful convictions we have that involve mistaken witness identification, we can do that as well. That's, I think, most recently was 762. So the work is entering those cases in the summaries, and then once we do that, our work is reviewed by a team of attorneys, law professors, and legal researchers. We are constantly consulting about some of the finer points, and then we also maintain this database, as there are updates on people's cases, such as if they're trying to seek compensation. We're based at these three universities: University of California, Irvine, University of Michigan, and Michigan State University. But we operate as a sort of a virtual academic research institute, and we get some university support, but we rely heavily on private philanthropy to fund our research and to keep providing all this data that the public can use. Again, we've been around since 2012, and we're really the only national database of this type of information out there.
There's been 2,678 exonerations in the United States since 1989. That's 24,150 years lost forever. There are numerous organizations out there committed to leveling the playing field. One is Eye on Innocence, based out of Jacksonville, Florida, and working cases in Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, and Louisiana. Then there's HealingJusticeProject.org. It's founded by Jennifer Thompson. You may remember her from episode 3. They are the only national nonprofit that seeks to address all harm from wrongful convictions. They recognize the exonerants and crime victims, their families, the community, and all of those that are impacted by our criminal justice system's failures. Sometimes I wonder about the people who get away with crimes that others are wrongfully convicted for. Do they feel guilt or relief? Do they continue to commit crimes? Does karma catch up on them like it did with Fred Mitchell? Specifically regarding Ronnie's case, did the true rapist ever suffer any form of justice? For Ronnie, Sarah, and all the victims of this case, I hope so. So, what would Ronnie do with the rest of his life? Well, that's kind of up to him. And that's kind of cool. But one thing that will occupy his time is justice. Ronnie has become something he never thought he would be. An advocate. Inspired by his wife, he advocates for prisoners' rights, as well as cases like the death of Kendrick Johnson, who was discovered inside of a rolled-up wrestling mat in a gymnasium of Lowndes High School, Valdosta, Georgia. Even worse, when his body was later exhumed, all of his organs were gone. It's an important case, and just like his wife, Ashley, Ronnie wants to use his voice for those who have lost theirs. On a side note, it's been quite touching seeing so many people of different backgrounds invested in Ronnie's story. As an African American who was raised in the Deep South, it's been eye-opening. That along with all the different races protesting for Black Lives Matter, I actually have hope for brighter and more just days ahead. Speaking of brighter days, on October 1st, 2020, Ronnie and Ashley moved into their new house. It was not perfect, but it was nicer than any place Ronnie had lived before. More importantly, it was all theirs. The dogs run around, getting to know their new environment. The couple look at the chipped paint peeling from the wall of their living room. Ronnie grabs buckets of paint. The can says it's ocean air blue. A few minutes later, they are wearing overalls and have placed newspapers on the floor. The two of them start painting the living room. Sounds like a task or errand to put off. But for Ronnie, this is how he builds his new life. This is how he creates happy memories to replace all those bad ones. This is how he creates beautiful memories for a marriage that has already survived what most could not. So they paint. He steals glances at her between strokes. He notices her frowning. The fumes were starting to get to her, so Ashley opened a few windows as well as the front door, allowing fresh air to breathe in and drowning them in sunlight. It almost seems like they're luminous. Ashley hears a car pulling up. Looking out the window, she notices a few friends have arrived, armed and ready to turn this house into a home. Ashley looks at Ronnie and then towards the window. He nods in acknowledgement, then refocuses on the duty at hand. He gets lost in the moment, dipping his brush in the paint and sweeping it across the wall. Each paint stroke covering up an old layer of worn-out paint, giving the wall, the room, and the house a new look. Ronnie dips the brush again and motions upward, higher and higher until the blue paint transitions into the sky. Above the clouds, the sky is just like the Long's new home, empty yet filled with endless possibilities. This has been Another Shade of Crime. Another Shade of Crime is written and produced by James Hayes, co-produced and sound designed by Liam Fox O'Brien, sound engineered by Ryan Majoris, and narrated by Ellis. If you enjoyed this podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe.